Hi, this is a podcast, Everything About Hockey. Today's subject matter is the NHL 2024 entry draft. I'm going to look into a deep evaluation of the top 16 picks in the draft, which teams have them, and their top prospects in their system right now. And then I'm also going to give you an idea which direction they should go when they are drafting their next future superstar. The first team I'm going to look at is the San Jose Sharks. They won the NHL lottery this year. They'll be picking first overall. A couple of notable players they have already in their system. There's William Eklund. He was drafted by the Sharks in 2021, 7th overall. He's a dynamic offensive forward. Last year's 4th overall pick the Sharks had was center Will Smith, another dynamic forward they have already in their system. They also have Philip Bystat. He was drafted by the Sharks in 2022, 27th overall. He's a big, strong center iceman. The last person I'm going to focus on is Quentin Musty. He was drafted by the Sharks in 2022, 27th overall. So you can see the Sharks have really gone out of their way to draft offense. So normally what I'd say here is they need to draft defense. But since they're drafting first overall, and there's a highly skilled top 6 center iceman from Boston University, Macklin Celebrini. He's projected as a high-end two-way center iceman. So that's the person they're going to draft, even though they really need to start developing defensemen. So I expect later on the draft, later in the first round, the second round, they better start picking some defensemen. But their future offense looks really good right now. The second pick is going to be the team that won the draft last year and now has the second overall pick this year, which is the Chicago Blackhawks. Connor Bedard, which is a franchise center iceman they got when they drafted him first overall in 2023. They also drafted Oliver Moore. He's a center iceman. He was drafted in 2023 also. He was a 19th overall pick. And they also got Lucas Reichel, left wing. He was drafted in 2020, a 17th overall pick. The last person I'm going to focus on here is defense, Kevin Korchinski. He was drafted by Chicago in 2022, 7th overall. He's a mobile, talented offensive defenseman. Chicago's going to be real interesting to see how they go because they have really holes at defense. And even their NHL level defense with the Hawks. You have Seth Jones, an elite defenseman, number 1 defenseman, but there's not much after that. And in the system, there's not much after that either. So you would think defense is a critical part for a second overall pick. But then again, you have Connor McDavid sitting there, an elite franchise center iceman they drafted last year, first overall. He needs help. He can't do this all by himself. So it's going to be really interesting to see which way they go. They go and help a real weakness on defense, or do they go and try to get another player to help Connor McDavid? I would lean towards getting another player to add to help Connor McDavid out. You know, like McDavid has Draisaitl. He really needs somebody for the other teams to start focusing on them too. Now, there is one player, though, that's be really interesting and real tempting for them to pick, Ivan Demyov. He's a Russian, unbelievably highly skilled forward. And normally, highly skilled forwards only have like 1 or 2 go-to moves. He has like a half a dozen go-to moves. The problem is he's only playing for SKA, St. Petersburg, and the KHL, which means that he's going to be obligated to play in Russia for several years. So do they want to pick a North American player they could probably get either next year or the following year, or they want to wait, get 3 or 4 years and get a unbelievably dynamic scorer to go with Connor McDavid? That's going to be a real interesting pick. Now let's look at the next team. That is the Anaheim Ducks. They get the 3rd pick in this NHL draft. So let's look at the prospects they have in their system, and also the guys under 21. Leo Carlsson is the first person I'm going to put a focus on. He's a talented playmaking center. They drafted last year, 2023. He was a second overall pick. Now let's look at the next guy, Mason McTavish. He was drafted in 2021, third overall. He's an excellent scoring forward. The next person we're going to look at is Cutter Gauthier. He was actually drafted by Philadelphia in 2022. Fifth overall. He's a versatile, talented power forward. Interesting about him, though, is Cutter didn't have anything to do with the Flyers. He actually refused to talk to him. So he got traded to the Anaheim Ducks. So they got another talented forward in their mix. The defenseman I'm going to focus on is Pavel Mentchov. He was drafted by Anaheim in 2022, 10th overall. He's a versatile, very talented defenseman. And this team has a bunch of talent, not only on the offensive side, but the defensive side. Not only in the NHL, but also in the prospects. They're deep on both sides. So it's a situation where most GMs would say, well, we'll just go ahead and pick the best available player. But see, I don't agree with that. When you're this deep overall, I always have the philosophy that offense wins games, defense wins championships. I think where they're picking now, you go with a defenseman. And this is a defensive-heavy draft. So there's a lot of defensemen available. Now let's look at the next team, which is the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're picking fourth overall in this draft. First person I'm going to look at is their last year's third overall pick they had. They picked Adam Fantilli. He's a franchise center iceman. He had a really solid first part of the season last year. But unfortunately, he got his leg cut with a hockey skate. That ended his season last year, but he is expected to make a full recover for next year. Let's look at a few more people. They've got Kent Johnson. He's a right winger. He was drafted in 2021, fifth overall. He's a talented top six forward. They also got Cole Cylinder. They drafted him in 2021, 12th overall. He's a high-end, all-around center iceman. The last forward is Gavin Brindley. He was drafted in Columbus in 2023, second round, 34th overall. He's a talented, versatile, top six forward. He played for the University of Michigan. Next year will be his rookie year, turning pro. He was actually Adam Fantilli's one of his best buds at the University of Michigan. And the defenseman I'm going to focus on is David Juracek. He was drafted by Columbus in 2022, sixth overall. He's a franchise defenseman, and he's really turned into a real stud at the AHL level. I can see him being a real push to make it parent club and play in Columbus next year. This is another one of those teams that I've drafted a lot the last couple of years, very high, and got a lot of talent, a lot of young prospects, both on the offense and the defense. So, they really don't have a real blaring weakness at offense and defense. Now, goaltending is a different situation. Of course, my philosophy is, though, you don't draft a goaltender in the first round. It's too chancy. So, even though I was talking about Anaheim drafting a defenseman because it was a defensive-heavy draft, I think Columbus also should draft a defenseman too. Because, like I said before, offense wins you games, defense wins you championships. And they need all the defensive help they can get. Now let's look at the next team, which is the Montreal Canadiens. They're going to be picking fifth overall. Let's look at some prospects. First one I look at is Sarai Sikorsky. He was a draft pick of Montreal in 2022, first overall, a talented scoring forward. They also have Cole Caulfield, also is actually playing at the parent club right now, and Nick Suzuki. So they've got some talent right now playing for this team. But they also could use a little bit more offensive depth. This is kind of where I'm going with this one. I really do think the Montreal Canadiens should be drafting an offensive for us. Big, strong, talented center would be really great fit for this team right now to develop. They definitely could use some help on the defense because they really don't have any stud prospects, blue chip prospect defensemen in the system right now. But at 5, I think there'd be more of a chance of getting a better forward than a defenseman at that pick. Plus, they could use a little bit more help offensively, too. The 6th overall pick goes to the new team, Utah Hockey Team. That's supposedly what they're going to call themselves. The Utah Hockey Team. Sounds like a soccer team to me. I don't really get it, but that's the way they're going to go. This is the team that was formerly the Arizona Coyotes that had moved to Utah because of financial restraints. But that's what I heard they're going to call themselves at least the first year, is the Utah Hockey Team. I think it sounds stupid, but they didn't ask me. Let's look at some of the people they have in their system. Dylan Guenther is the first person I'm going to look at. He was drafted by Arizona in 2021, 9th overall. He's a talented scoring winger. And they got Logan Cooley. He was drafted by Arizona in 2022, 3rd overall. He's a talented, creative offensive forward. And they also have Connor Geekie. Arizona drafted him in 2022, 11th overall. He's a talented center. The next person I'm going to focus on is on the blue line, and that's Maverick Lambeau. He was drafted by Arizona 2022, 29th overall that year. This is what I'm thinking about them. You had that group of offense with Clayton Keller, and Utah's got plenty of offense. They need to get a defense in there. They really don't have any blue chip, big stud defensemen prospects that you kind of would expect to be in the number 1 pairing at the NHL level. Now, don't get me wrong. They have drafted some defensemen early in the last couple of years. But since this is a very heavy defensive draft, I think it'd be best to get another defenseman at that pick. The next team we're going to look at is the Ottawa Senators. They're picking 7th overall. First person I'm going to focus on is Ridley Gregg. He's drafted by Ottawa in 2020, 28th overall, a versatile forward. They also have Tyler Boucher. He was drafted by Ottawa in 2021, 10th overall. He's a big physical winger. On the blue line, they have Jake Sanderson. He was drafted by Ottawa in 2020, 5th overall. He's a high-quality, big defenseman. Then at goal, they drafted Mad Shogar. In 2019, he was a second-round, 37th overall player picked. He's developing into a really talented young goaltender, which is really good because their goaltenders at the NHL level had some real ups and downs this year. Korpisalo and Forsberg. I don't think I'd be adding defense. With Sanderson, Jacob Chinkrin, which he's only 25 years old, and Thomas Gilat's only 26 years old. So they've got a pretty young, solid blue line they're developing. I would go more offense if I was the Ottawa Senators. They also have the 21-year-old Tim Stützle. He's their number 1 center iceman. This is the guy that I really wanted, one of my 2 favorite teams to draft, but unfortunately Ottawa got him instead. But he's my favorite guy outside of my 2 favorite teams. But you can tell, though, Ottawa's got a little bit of everything. They even got Brandon Tkachuk. He's only 24 years old. That big power forward. So they got everything they need. This team just needs to learn how to win. But if I was drafting them at the spot they were, I would draft offense. They still need another sniper, a young blue chip prospect sniper in the system. The next team is going to be drafted 8th overall. They're actually now the second newest team in the NHL, the Seattle Kraken. There's only going to be 2 guys I'm going to focus on. First one is Matty Beniers. He was a 2021 pick, 2nd overall. He's developing into a franchise center iceman. And the next one I'm going to focus on is another high pick. He was drafted in 2022, 4th overall. He had a little trouble early on and learned how to play the NHL game, but now he's gradually turning into an NHL player. But where they're picking, they're not going to get a real impact player for next year. But the GM of the team, Ron Francis, they got to start adding prospects to this farm system so they don't have to rely on free agencies to fill in gaps. So saying that, I definitely would pick the best available player no matter what they are, except for goaltending. I don't like picking goaltending in the first round. There are no real stud goaltenders anyways in this draft, but I definitely would not pick a goaltender in the first round. I don't care how good they are. Goaltenders is too much hit and miss. You never know what you're going to get. And I always cringe when I see a team take them in the first round. I mean, it's like the Forrest Gump thing. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. But I definitely would take the best available forward or defenseman at that spot. For the next pick, I have the Calgary Flames picking 9th. This is an interesting team because they're right in the middle of a transition period. They have 2 interesting prospects that I'm going to focus on now. First one is Jacob Pelletier. He's a left winger. He was drafted by Calgary in 2019, 26th overall. He's a talented, versatile two-way forward. And Blake Coleman, he was drafted in 2012, 3rd round, 75th overall. He's a speedy two-way forward. They also have Dustin Wolf. He was drafted by Calgary in 2019, 7th round, 214th overall pick. He's developing into a solid NHL goaltender. Right now he's playing in the AHL. This is one of those teams that doesn't have a lot of blue chippers in their system on offense and defense. But I'm looking at their offense. Their offensive top scoring guys are starting to get a little old. This is where I think they need to be drafting at that pick. Another offensive. It'd be real great if they can get a real gem at that 9th pick and get an elite offensive forward, high-end scorer, if they could possibly pull that off so they could develop him and put him in their top forward line in the future. Of course, then again, if there's a defenseman they like at this pick, it would be a smart move to pick him. So, I mean, they could go either way. I mean, the best available athlete, I guess, I'm what I'm thinking about taking at the 9th pick. Now, the 10th pick is a team I really didn't expect to be picking 10th. I thought they'd be a playoff team. They're really quite disappointing in my mind. It's the New Jersey Devils. I mean, they thought they were, a high-end, highly skilled team. So picking 10th really is a disappointing season for them. But they do have Luke Hughes. He's a defenseman. He was drafted by New Jersey in 2021, 4th overall. He's a dynamic offensive defenseman. And they also drafted in the 2022 2nd overall pick, Simon Nemeth. He's a talented all-around defenseman. So they got 2 really young, anchored blue liners already actually playing for their parent club, which are high draft picks. Then at goal, they have Nico Doris. He's drafted by New Jersey in 2000, 3rd round, 84th overall. He's developing to a big, solid goaltender. So their blue line in the future and their defense looks really good. Now, offense is where their problem is. Not in the NHL level, but they really don't have a whole lot of offense they've developed at the minor league level. They really need to draft a big offensive forward at this pick. See if they can get another big steal at this pick and get a real talented forward to put into that lineup. Of course, they don't need to be drafting centers at this point in time. I mean, they already got Jack Hughes and Nico Hitcher already at center for number 1 and number 2. And they got Juster Bratt at wing for the top scorer. But I would still go and try to get another sniper. I still can't believe this team is picked 10th overall with how talented this NHL roster was. The next team is the Buffalo Sabres. They're picking 11th overall. This is a team that never is quite be able to get over the hump, actually get a playoff spot. They're always really close, but they've never able to know how to win, is what I should say. They've never learned how to win yet. I'm going to start off their big stud defenseman, Owen Power. He was drafted by Buffalo in 2021 actually. 1st overall pick. He's a quality big defenseman. The guy's 6'6", He needs to add a little bit more weight, though. But he's a huge defenseman. I also have Matt Savoy. He was drafted by Buffalo in 2022, 9th overall pick. He's an offensive, gritty type of a forward. I've always been kind of impressed with him. The other guy I'm going to feature, he had a solid rookie season this year. Zach Benson. He got drafted by Buffalo in 2023, 13th overall pick. The only thing I'm worried about there is his sophomore slump. How bad will that sophomore slump be? Because Buffalo's always been a team that's had a hard time scoring. They also have Yuri Kulik, a Buffalo drafted in 2022, first round, 28th overall. He's a solid all-around forward. Now, I'm going to tick off a few Sabres fans, probably the whole entire Sabre fans when I say this, but offensively, Sabres are in solid shape. They're developing some good young forwards. But defensively, they don't have a true number one defenseman. They've got a few top pairing defensemen, but they don't have a true number one big stud defenseman that can do everything. Play in the offensive zone, play in the defensive zone, shut down a guy, clear the corners, clear out in front of the net. They've yet to really have that. Power could possibly be that, but he's nowhere near that yet. I think they should really go for drafting another defenseman in this pick, a big, strong defenseman, just in case the players they already have in their system don't develop, they have more options. Philadelphia is the next team. They're picking 12th overall. This is a surprise team for me. I mean, Torts can really get a lot out of a team. He can get 120% out of that team. He pushes every button, and everybody just plays 110%, 120%. Some of those guys play 150%. It's amazing what he can do when he coaches a team. First person I'm going to look at is their prospects are Matvey Mishkov. He plays for St. Petersburg in the KHL. He's a highly talented forward. At 7th last year when they drafted him, 7th overall in 2023, this was a steal in my opinion. Because remember, this team is just now starting to go through a transition period and start to restock their prospect list. And of course, on the blue line, they got Jamie Drysdale. They traded from Anaheim to get him. Anaheim picked him 2020, 6th overall. He's a talented all-around defenseman. Should be playing in the top 4. And then they also got Oliver Bonk. Philadelphia drafted him in 2023. First round, 22nd overall. He's another all-around defenseman too. So they've already started rebuilding their blue line. They've got an possible elite scorer coming out of the KHL in the next couple of years. So they're just now starting to develop a good, solid prospect list. After giving away so many draft picks, doing all those cup runs the last few years, but I still think they need to go and get a few more offensive pieces to really stock up the prospects forward list. I would draft a forward, the best forward available, that I'd go with here. The next team I'm going to look at is the Minnesota Wild, 13th overall pick. This team is also doing a little bit of a transition, but they've got one heck of a defenseman already in their system, actually playing for the Wild team. They acquired him from the LA Kings in June of 2022. He was drafted by the Kings in 2020, second round, 45th overall. They also have a really interesting, and I think he's a pretty talented forward, Daniela Yurov. He's a Russian forward. Minnesota drafted in 2022, 24th overall. Yeah, I think he's going to be a talented winger for this team. The last one I want to focus on is Jesper Wallstedt. Minnesota drafted him in 2021, 20th overall. He's got the potential for being a number one goaltender, but he's having a really hard time developing into that. This is what I'm talking about, picking goaltenders in the first round. You never know what you're going to get. He doesn't seem to have the skill set to claim an NHL spot on a regular basis. I mean, he's a good goaltender. I just don't know. I mean, it's really interesting to see what happens to him. Like last year, He played for the Iowa Wild, the AAA team, 50 games. His goals against average was 2.56. He only played 3 games at the NHL level, and his goal against average there was 3.1. So he was averaging a little over 2 goals a game at the AHL level, but at the NHL level, he was averaging 3 goals a game. Now, I'm going to admit, this is his first year as a pro, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens the next few years to see if he can actually develop into an NHL starting goaltender. Said that, this team's in a transition period too. So this is the point where I think this team should just pick the best available player at this position, because they could use offensive help and they could use defensive help at this point in time in their prospects. Because this one of those teams is not doing a full rebuild. They're just doing a retool, which means this team doesn't think that they're that bad they have to tear everything down and get rid of everything. They think they're good enough to be in the playoffs next year. They're just kind of doing some fine-tuning and adding a little extra youth to the system right now while they have the opportunity. For the 14th pick, this one used to be belonging to the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they traded to San Jose Sharks, so the Sharks now have 2 picks in the top 15. The first pick overall is obviously Matt Sabrini. Of course, now they have William Eklund, Will Smith, already on the system, so they got plenty of high-end offense. I think they should go with a defenseman here. They're lacking in defense, especially a true top-pairing defenseman. This would be an ideal spot to get that. This is another one of those teams that's been in the 5-year rebuild program. The 15th pick goes to Detroit Red Wings. They've always been close to the playoffs, but they can't seem to figure out how to win it when they need to and get themselves over the hump and in that playoff spot. But they've got a lot of young talent. Lucas Raymond, he was drafted by Detroit in 2020, both overall, an elite scoring winger. Simon Edmondson, he was drafted by Detroit in 2021, a 6th overall pick, an all-around defenseman. You also have to look at Marco Kasper. He was drafted by Detroit in 2022, 8th overall, a quality two-way forward. Also, Detroit's got their goaltender of the future, Sebastian Cossa. He played 2 years ago for the Toledo Walleyes in AA, and now this year he's played for Grand Rapids Griffins, AAA. He was a 15th overall pick in 2021, their 2nd pick in that first round. Another goaltender that's taken a little while to develop. Also, like I said, their number 1 top defenseman is Snyder. He's only 22 years old. So this team's got a lot of talent. But I do think they're missing one thing. That's a pure sniper they can develop in the system to come up and get those clutch goals when they need it to get a real playoff push. The 16th pick belongs to the St. Louis Blues. 2 players I'm going to focus on is Jake Neighbors. He was drafted by St. Louis in 2020, 26th overall. He's a solid, versatile, top 6 winger. And then Jimmy Snuggerud. He was drafted by St. Louis in 2022, 23rd overall. He's a talented scoring, top 6 winger too. And then in 2023, St. Louis Blues drafted Otto Stenberg, 25th overall. He's a big center iceman out of Sweden. And also St. Louis, in that same draft in 2023, 29th overall, they drafted Theo Lindstein. He's a versatile defenseman. And what I like about this is they drafted their forward, and at the end of the draft, they drafted a defenseman. They hit both big areas when they had the opportunity. It's going to be really interesting to see where guys like Matt Celebrini, the big center from Boston College, expected 1st overall goes. And then also, the highly, highly skilled Ivan Denyov. He plays for SKA St. Petersburg in Russia. Who will take a chance on him? And if everything goes right, they just acquired an unbelievably talented player. Well, that's my draft preview. Thanks a lot for listening.